The day Willow Everett stood on her porch and watched dust billowing behind her husband's horse as he rode away from their struggling ranch outside Lonesome Creek, Texas, in 1876. She never imagined he'd leave her with nothing but a mountain of debt and a broken promise. That same dust would return 3 months later, but it wouldn't be Gilbert coming home. It would be a stranger who carried echoes of everything she'd lost. Willow brushed back a strand of her chestnut hair that had escaped her simple bun, squinting against the harsh Texas sun as she watched the distant figure approach. The stranger rode tall in the saddle, his silhouette unmistakably that of a working cowboy. For a fleeting moment, her heart stuttered with misplaced hope before reality settled back in. Gilbert wasn't coming back. The letter delivered by the stagecoach driver last month had made that painfully clear. "Sorry about your troubles, Mrs. Everett," the driver had said, tipping his hat as he handed her the wrinkled envelope. Inside, Gilbert's hastily scrawled words cut deeper than any knife could have. "Found a better life in California. Don't wait for me." 4 years of marriage, 2 years of struggling to make their small cattle ranch viable, all abandoned in a single sentence. Willow's gaze shifted to the approaching rider again. He was closer now, his horse moving at an unhurried pace. Her hand moved instinctively to the shotgun propped beside the door. Times were hard, and a woman alone on a failing ranch made an easy target for all manner of trouble. As the rider drew near, she could make out more details: broad shoulders, dark hat pulled low, and a horse that looked far too fine for an ordinary drifter. He rode a magnificent chestnut quarter horse with a blaze running down its face, the kind that cost more than Willow had seen in a year. "Madam," the stranger called, stopping a respectful distance from her porch. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a face weathered by years under the open sky. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held her gaze steadily. "Name's Frederick Faulkner." "Folks call me Fred." "State your business, Mr. Faulkner," Willow replied, her fingers still resting near the shotgun. He nodded, seemingly appreciating her caution. "I'm looking for Gilbert Everett. I've got something that belongs to him." The mention of her husband's name sent a painful jolt through Willow's chest. "You're about 3 months too late, Mr. Faulkner. Gilbert's gone." Something flickered across Frederick's face: surprise, perhaps disappointment. "Gone where, if you don't mind my asking?" "California." "Seeking his fortune, I suppose." Willow couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Left me with 40 acres, 12 underfed cattle, and more debt than I can count." Frederick's gaze swept over the property, taking in the sagging fence line, the peeling paint on the small ranch house, and the meager herd visible in the distance. His expression revealed nothing, but Willow felt her cheeks burn with shame. "What did my husband take from you?" she asked, suddenly curious about this stranger's business with Gilbert. Frederick swung down from his saddle with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life on horseback. "Not what he took, madam. What he won." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. "This is rightfully his, $500. Willow's knees nearly buckled. $500 was more money than she'd seen in years. It could save the ranch, pay off the most pressing debts, buy feed for the winter. "How did he?" she began, unable to finish the question. "Poker game in Abilene," Frederick explained. "I wasn't there myself, but my brother was. Said Gilbert won it fair and square from a cattle baron named Hollister, then left town in a hurry before collecting. Hollister's not the kind of man who welshes on a debt, even a gambling one. He gave my brother the money to deliver when he heard I was heading this way." Willow's mind was reeling. Gilbert had won a small fortune and hadn't bothered to collect it before abandoning her. "Why would you ride all this way to deliver money to a man you don't know?" Suspicion colored her voice. Frederick's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Hollister's my brother-in-law. Family honor demands debts get paid." He held out the pouch. "This belongs to the Everett Ranch, madam. That's you now, I reckon." Willow stared at the leather pouch, unable to move. Her years with Gilbert had taught her that nothing came without strings attached. "There must be something you want in return," she said cautiously. Frederick shook his head. "Just delivering what's owed, madam, though I wouldn't say no to some water for my horse before I head back to town." Something about his straightforward manner made Willow want to believe him. She nodded toward the water trough. "Help yourself. Your horse looks like he could use the rest." "Much obliged." Frederick led his horse to the trough, giving Willow a moment to collect her thoughts. $500. It was the answer to prayers she'd stopped praying weeks ago. But why had Gilbert left without collecting such a sum? It made no sense unless— "Mr. Faulkner," she called, following him to the trough. "Did your brother-in-law mention anything else about the game? Anything at all?" Frederick paused, his hand resting on his horse's neck. "Just that Gilbert seemed mighty nervous that night. Said he kept looking over his shoulder like he was expecting trouble." The pieces suddenly fit together in Willow's mind. The mysterious trips Gilbert had been taking in the weeks before he left, his increasing agitation, the mounting debts she kept discovering, debts that seemed to exceed their normal hardships. "I think my husband may have been in more trouble than just our failing ranch," she admitted. $500 wouldn't have been enough to fix whatever he was running from. Frederick studied her face. "Sounds like you got left with more than just land troubles, Mrs. Everett." "Willow," she corrected him, suddenly tired of formalities. "If you're bringing me $500 out of the blue, you might as well use my given name." He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Willow, then, and I'm Fred." As she watched him care for his horse with gentle, capable hands, Willow felt the strangest sensation, like a door that had been slammed shut was creaking open again, letting in a sliver of light. "Where are you staying in town, Fred?" she asked impulsively. "Haven't settled that yet." "Just rode in this morning, came straight here." Willow made a decision that surprised even herself. "I've got a spare room in the barn. It's not much, but it's clean. If you're looking for work while you're in these parts, I could use help fixing fences and moving what's left of my herd to better pasture." Frederick raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job, Willow? Room, board, and a small wage once I sort out these debts," she clarified. "I can't pay much, but it's honest work." "And you're not worried about having a stranger stay on your property?" Willow gestured to the shotgun she'd left on the porch. "I sleep light, and I'm a good shot. Besides, a man who rides half a day to deliver money that isn't his probably isn't planning to cut my throat in my sleep." That drew a genuine laugh from him, a warm sound that seemed to lighten the air around them. "Fair assessment. I was planning to look for work anyway. Cattle's what I know best." "Then we have a deal." Willow extended her hand, feeling strangely formal. Frederick took it, his calloused palm warm against hers. "We have a deal." That night, after showing Frederick to the small but clean room attached to the barn, Willow sat at her kitchen table counting the money for the third time. $500. She divided it carefully: $200 for the bank to hold off foreclosure, $100 for cattle feed, $50 for seed, $50 for supplies, and the rest kept safely hidden for emergencies. For the first time since Gilbert had ridden away, Willow allowed herself to feel something other than despair. Not hope. Exactly, she wasn't ready for that. But perhaps a quiet determination that had been buried under the weight of abandonment. Outside, she could hear Frederick moving around the barn, the solid, reassuring sounds of a man securing animals for the night. It was a sound she had missed. She realized not Gilbert specifically, but the presence of someone sharing the burden of this hardscrabble life. Morning came with the familiar crowing of her rooster. Willow was already at the stove preparing a simple breakfast when Frederick knocked on the door frame, hat in hand, looking as if he'd been awake for hours. "Morning," he said, remaining on the porch until she gestured him inside. "I checked your south fence line at sunrise. It's worse than it looked yesterday. Cattle could walk right through in at least 3 places." Willow nodded, unsurprised. Gilbert was never much for maintenance, said it was cheaper to round up strays than fix fences. She set a plate of eggs and biscuits before him. "Eat first, then we'll prioritize what needs doing most." Frederick sat at the table, waiting until she joined him before picking up his fork. "Did he leave any breeding stock worth salvaging?" he asked between bites. "2 bulls, about 30 cows, though half aren't in good condition," Willow replied. "The best ones are the Longhorn Hereford crosses. Gilbert bought them from a rancher moving north last year, one of his few good decisions." Frederick nodded thoughtfully. "Good stock for this climate. Tough enough for the heat but still put on decent weight." He paused, studying her face. "How long have you been trying to keep this place going alone?" 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, Willow answered without hesitation. "But it was failing long before Gilbert left. You know ranching?" he asked, clearly assessing her capabilities. "I grew up on a farm in East Texas," she replied. "Different animals, same principles. Work hard, pray for rain, don't expect miracles." A smile creased the corners of his eyes. Sound philosophy. After breakfast, they walked the property together. Frederick asked questions, listened carefully to her answers, and offered observations without being condescending. By midday, they had a plan: repair the worst fence breaks first, move the cattle to the north pasture where the grass was still decent, separate the weakest cows for special feeding, and ride into town for supplies. Willow watched him as he worked, fascinated by the economy of his movements. Unlike Gilbert, who approached every task with frustrated impatience, Frederick worked methodically, each action purposeful. By sunset, he'd repaired 2 major fence breaches and helped her move the healthier cattle to better grazing. "You're good at this," she observed as they walked back to the house, the setting sun casting long shadows ahead of them. "Been doing it since I was 12, he replied. "My pa ran cattle in the Panhandle before the war, taught me everything I know." "And now?" she asked, curious about this man who had appeared on her doorstep with unexpected salvation. Frederick was quiet for a moment. "Been drifting the last few years. Working ranches from Kansas to New Mexico. Never found a place that felt worth staying." There was a story there, Willow sensed, but she didn't press. Everyone in the West carried their past like saddlebags, some heavier than others. The days fell into a rhythm. Frederick rose before dawn each morning, taking care of the most strenuous work before the worst heat of the day. Willow managed the household, the vegetable garden, and the poultry, while also helping with the cattle when needed. They ate meals together, their conversations gradually extending beyond the immediate needs of the ranch. On the 7th day, they rode into Lonesome Creek together. Willow was acutely aware of the glances and whispers that followed them down the dusty Main Street. A woman whose husband had abandoned her, now seen with another man, it was the kind of gossip that sustained small towns through drought and hardship. "Mrs. Everett," Mr. Hargrove, the bank manager, greeted her with barely concealed surprise when she entered his office. "I wasn't expecting to see you until next month's payment was due." "I've come to pay early," Willow said, placing $200 on his desk with steady hands, "and to discuss restructuring the remaining debt." Hargrove's eyes widened at the sight of the money, then darted suspiciously to Frederick, who waited quietly by the door. "And who might this be?" "Frederick Faulkner, sir," he introduced himself. "Working for Mrs. Everett." "I see." The banker's tone suggested he saw quite a bit more than was being said. "Well, Mrs. Everett, this payment certainly buys you some time. Perhaps we can discuss the remaining balance next month." Willow straightened her shoulders. "I'd prefer to discuss it now. I have a plan for making the ranch profitable again, but I need reasonable payment terms." What followed was a negotiation unlike any Willow had previously attempted, with Frederick occasionally offering quiet insights about cattle prices and market trends. She presented a clear-eyed assessment of the ranch's potential and a repayment plan that would work with the seasonal nature of ranching income. "Your husband never mentioned you had such a head for business, Mrs. Everett," Hargrove remarked when they had finally reached an agreement. "My husband never asked," Willow replied simply. Outside the bank, Frederick regarded her with newfound respect. That was impressive. Most ranchers I know would have been chewed up and spat out by Hargrove. Willow felt a flush of pride at his words. Gilbert always handled the bank, said it wasn't proper for a woman to discuss money matters. She shook her head at the memory. Turns out he was terrible at it. "His loss," Frederick said quietly, and something in his tone made Willow's heart beat a little faster. They completed their errands in town supplies at the general store, seed at the feed merchant, mail at the post office. As they prepared to leave, the stagecoach rumbled into town, disgorging passengers dusty from the road. "Willow Everett, is that you?" A familiar voice called. Turning, Willow was surprised to see Violet Harrison, the daughter of her nearest neighbors, hurrying toward her. They had been friends of sorts before Gilbert left, though the Harrisons had gradually distanced themselves as the Everett ranch declined. "Violet, hello," Willow greeted her, conscious of Frederick standing quietly beside her. "I just heard the most extraordinary rumor," Violet said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "They're saying Gilbert was seen in San Antonio last week, in the company of the Sutton brothers." Willow felt the blood drain from her face. The Sutton brothers were notorious throughout South Texas cattle rustlers, horse thieves, and worse. If Gilbert had fallen in with them. "Are you certain?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "My cousin Eliza saw him plain as day," Violet insisted. "Said he looked prosperous too, new clothes and all." Her gaze shifted curiously to Frederick. "And who might this be?" "Frederick Faulkner," Willow said distractedly, her mind racing with the implications of Violet's news. "He's working for me." Violet's eyebrows rose. "Is he now?" "Well, isn't that progressive of you?" Her tone made the words sound like an accusation. Frederick tipped his hat politely but said nothing, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "We should be getting back," Willow said, suddenly eager to escape both Violet's prying eyes and the disturbing news about Gilbert. "Good to see you, Violet." As they rode home, Willow's thoughts tumbled over each other. Gilbert with the Sutton brothers, the mysterious debts, his hasty departure. It all pointed to a troubling conclusion. Her husband hadn't just abandoned her for a better opportunity. He'd been involved in something criminal. "You're quiet," Frederick observed as they crested the hill that overlooked the ranch. Willow sighed, deciding honesty was simpler than evasion. "If Gilbert's running with the Suttons, it explains a lot. The secret trips, the money problems, the way he left without warning." Frederick nodded slowly. "I've heard of the Suttons. Bad business, that gang." "What I don't understand is why," Willow continued, the frustration of months breaking through. "We weren't rich, but we weren't desperate either. Not until he started disappearing for days at a time, coming back with wild stories about business opportunities." "Some men aren't cut out for the steady path," Frederick said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested personal knowledge. "They're always chasing the horizon, convinced something better is just out of reach." Willow studied his profile, wondering again about his own story. And you? Are you a horizon chaser, Fred? He met her gaze, his blue eyes thoughtful. Used to be. Not so much anymore. The implications of his words hung in the air between them, delicate as spider silk and just as easy to break. Willow looked away first, uncertain of the feelings stirring inside her, feelings that seemed disloyal to her marriage, broken though it was. We should check the north pasture before dark, she said, changing the subject. I thought I saw signs of coyotes near the creek yesterday. Frederick accepted the shift in conversation without comment. Lead the way. The next few weeks brought steady progress. Under Frederick's guidance, the remaining cattle began to improve in condition. The fences were repaired, the barn roof patched, and the vegetable garden expanded. Willow found herself sleeping better at night, the constant worry that had been her companion gradually easing. What didn't ease was her growing awareness of Frederick himself. The way sunlight caught in his hair when he removed his hat to wipe his brow. The gentle way he handled even the most irritable bull. The sound of his deep voice humming old trail songs as he worked. She caught herself watching him when she should have been focused on her own tasks, then berating herself for such foolishness. She was still a married woman, even if her husband had abandoned her. And Frederick was an employee, a drifter who'd happened to bring unexpected fortune to her door. Nothing more. Yet sometimes she would catch him looking at her with an expression that made her wonder if he was fighting similar battles with himself. The situation came to a head on a stormy afternoon in late summer. They'd been racing to bring in the last of the hay before the rain hit, working side by side in a comfortable rhythm that had become familiar. When the first fat drops began to fall, they made a final dash to the barn with the loaded wagon, laughing as they were soaked in the sudden downpour. Safe inside the barn, Frederick helped Willow down from the wagon seat, his hands strong and sure at her waist. But instead of stepping back, they found themselves standing close, rain dripping from their clothes, breathing hard from exertion and something else neither wanted to name. "Willow," Frederick said, his voice rough with restraint. "Don't," she whispered, not moving away but not moving closer either. "We can't. I know." His hands fell away from her waist but his eyes remained on hers. "I should leave." Panic flared in Willow's chest. "Leave the ranch." "It would be better," he said, running a hand through his wet hair. "For both of us." "No," the word escaped before she could stop it. "I mean, the ranch needs you. I can't manage alone, not yet." It was true, but not the whole truth, and they both knew it. Frederick's expression softened. "I'll stay until after the fall roundup. By then, you'll be on better footing." Willow nodded, relieved yet strangely disappointed. Part of her had hoped he would argue, would declare that his feelings made staying worth the risk. But he was too honorable for that, and in truth, she was grateful for it. "Thank you," she said simply. They maintained a careful distance after that day, their interactions friendly but guarded. Willow threw herself into ranch work with renewed determination, while Frederick spent more time in town, making connections with cattle buyers and supply merchants on the ranch's behalf. It was on one such trip to town, nearly 3 months after he'd first ridden onto her land, that everything changed. Frederick had gone to meet with a cattle buyer from San Antonio, hoping to negotiate a better price for their small but improving herd. Willow stayed behind, taking advantage of his absence to clean and organize the small room he occupied in the barn, refreshing the bedding and hanging the clean clothes she'd washed. She was just finishing when she heard horses approaching, several of them, moving fast. Her first thought was that Frederick had returned with company, perhaps the buyer wanting to see the cattle firsthand. But the prickle of unease along her spine told her otherwise. Grabbing her shotgun from inside the door, Willow stepped out to see 5 riders pulling up in her yard, dust billowing around them. Her blood froze when she recognized the man in the center, Gilbert. Her husband looked different, expensively dressed, his formerly lean frame filled out, his face flushed with what might have been liquor or excitement. Beside him sat 2 hard-faced men she didn't recognize, their hands resting casually near holstered guns. "Willow," Gilbert called out, as if he were returning from a short trip to town rather than a 3-month abandonment. "Look at you, still keeping the old place going." Willow kept the shotgun visible but pointed at the ground. "What are you doing here, Gilbert?" He dismounted with a flourish, gesturing grandly at the ranch as if presenting a prize. "I've come home, of course, and with good news. I've sold the ranch, all of it, for more money than you could imagine." "You what?" Willow felt as if the ground had tilted beneath her feet. $2,000, Gilbert announced proudly. "These gentlemen represent Mr. James Sutton, who's expanding his holdings in the area. All we need is your signature, and we can be on our way to a new life in California." Willow stared at him in disbelief. "You abandoned me, left me with debts, and now you think you can ride back in and sell my home out from under me?" Gilbert's expression hardened. "It's my name on the deed, Willow. My ranch. I'm being generous, including you in my plans." "Your generosity is noted," she replied coldly. "Now get off my property." One of the men beside Gilbert shifted in his saddle. "Mrs. Everett, perhaps you don't understand the situation. This sale is happening with or without your cooperation." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Willow's fingers tightened on the shotgun. "I understand perfectly. My husband made deals with thieves and criminals, and now he's brought them to my door." Gilbert's face flushed with anger. "Don't be difficult, Willow. Sign the papers, pack your things, and let's go. Or stay here alone, see how long you last without me." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Without you? I've been doing better these past 3 months than in the 2 years before you left." Something ugly flickered in Gilbert's eyes. "Because of your new friend, the drifter." "Oh yes, I've heard all about him." He took a threatening step toward her. "Did you even wait until my horse was out of sight before letting him into my house? Into my bed?" Willow raised the shotgun, stopping Gilbert in his tracks. "One more step, and I'll show you just how well I've managed without you." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the sound of another horse approaching broke the standoff. All heads turned to see Frederick riding fast toward the house, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. He dismounted in one fluid motion, moving to stand beside Willow. "Everything all right here?" "Just a family disagreement," Gilbert said with false cheer. "Nothing that concerns hired help." Frederick's gaze flicked to the armed men, then back to Willow. "Mrs. Everett, my husband was just explaining how he's sold our ranch without consulting me," Willow said, not lowering the shotgun. "To the Sutton gang." Frederick's posture shifted subtly, his hand moving closer to the gun at his hip. "That right?" One of the men with Gilbert leaned forward. "This ain't your business, Cowboy. Walk away while you still can." "Afraid I can't do that," Frederick replied evenly. "You see, Mrs. Everett and I have a business arrangement of our own. I'm invested in this ranch now." Gilbert's face contorted with fury. "You lying whore," he spat at Willow. "I leave for a few months and you're already—" He never finished the sentence. Frederick's fist connected with Gilbert's jaw, sending him sprawling in the dirt. Instantly, guns were drawn on both sides. Willow steadied the shotgun, aiming at the nearest Sutton man while Frederick had his Colt trained on the other. Gilbert scrambled backward, blood trickling from his split lip. "You've made a mistake," one of the Sutton men said, his voice deadly calm. "Nobody crosses Mr. Sutton." "And nobody threatens Mrs. Everett on her own land," Frederick countered. "Ride out now, and we can all pretend this never happened." The standoff stretched, tension crackling in the air like the promise of lightning. Finally, the older of the two Sutton men gestured to his companion to lower his weapon. "This isn't over," he warned. "Mr. Sutton doesn't give up what he considers his." "Neither do I," Willow replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Gilbert had regained his feet, brushing dirt from his expensive clothes with trembling hands. "You'll regret this, Willow," he said, his voice thick with humiliation and rage. "Both of you will." The Sutton men helped Gilbert onto his horse, his dignity in tatters. As they rode away, Willow kept the shotgun trained on their backs until they disappeared from sight. Only then did she allow her arms to lower, the barrel pointing toward the ground as her shoulders sagged with relief and delayed fear. "Are you all right?" Frederick asked, holstering his pistol. Willow nodded, unable to speak for a moment as reaction set in. When she finally found her voice, she asked, "What did you mean about being invested in the ranch?" "I meant that I've put too much work into this place to see it sold to criminals," he replied, though something in his eyes suggested he meant more than that. "Besides, Gilbert can't legally sell without your signature." "He seemed to think the Suttons don't much care about legalities," Willow said, her voice shaking slightly. Frederick's expression turned grim. "He's probably right about that. They won't give up easily." "What do we do?" For the first time since she'd known him, Willow saw uncertainty cross Frederick's face. "We need to talk to the sheriff," he said finally. "And then we need to decide if this ranch is worth fighting for." "It is to me," Willow said firmly. "It's all I have." Frederick studied her face, then nodded. "Then we fight." They rode into Lonesome Creek together, heading straight for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tanner was a grizzled veteran of both the war and decades of frontier law enforcement. He listened to their story with a deepening frown. "The Suttons," he said when they finished, shaking his head. "Bad business, that family. Been trying to get something solid on them for years." "Will you help us?" Willow asked. Tanner sighed heavily. "I'll send a telegram to the Rangers. They've been building a case against the Suttons for months. But I won't lie to you. Mrs. Everett, my jurisdiction ends at the town limits, and I've got just one deputy. If the Suttons decide to move against your ranch before help arrives." He let the sentence hang unfinished, but his meaning was clear. They would be on their own. As they left the sheriff's office, the weight of their situation settled fully on Willow's shoulders. "I can't ask you to risk your life for my ranch," she told Frederick as they walked toward their horses. "This isn't your fight." Frederick stopped, turning to face her. "Willow, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said when I first arrived." The seriousness in his tone sent a chill through her. "What is it?" He glanced around the busy street, then shook his head. "Not here. When we get back to the ranch." The ride home was tense with unspoken words. Willow's mind raced with possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Was Frederick connected to the Suttons somehow? Had he been using her all along, gaining her trust for some hidden purpose? By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in vivid streaks of orange and purple. Frederick checked the property carefully before they dismounted, scanning for any sign of unwelcome visitors. "We're alone," he confirmed, helping her down from her horse. "Let's go inside." In the kitchen, Willow busied herself lighting lamps and stoking the fire, finding comfort in the familiar routine while bracing herself for whatever revelation was coming. When she could delay no longer, she turned to face Frederick, who stood by the window looking out into the gathering darkness. "Tell me," she said simply. Frederick took a deep breath, then met her gaze directly. "I didn't come here by chance, Willow, and the story about the poker winnings wasn't entirely true." Willow felt her stomach drop. "Go on." "I've been tracking the Sutton gang for over a year," he continued. "Not as a lawman, this is personal for me. They killed my brother when he refused to sell his ranch in the Panhandle. Understanding dawned on Willow. So when you heard Gilbert was involved with them? Frederick nodded. I thought he might lead me to them. I followed his trail from Abilene to here. The money was real, he did win it from Hollister, but I was the one who collected it, thinking I could use it to gain his trust. And instead, you found me, Willow said softly. Instead, I found you, he agreed, his expression softening. Alone, struggling, but fighting with everything you had to save this place. I couldn't just walk away. Willow absorbed this information, searching her feelings. She should be angry at the deception, but instead she felt strangely relieved. This explained his unexpected appearance, his willingness to help a stranger, his skill with cattle that went beyond that of an ordinary drifter. "Why tell me now?" she asked. "Because the stakes have changed," he replied. "The Suttons will be back, and you deserve to know exactly who you're standing beside." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "And because I can't keep pretending that my feelings for you are just those of a hired hand for his employer." Willow's heart stuttered. "Frederick." "I know," he said quickly. "You're married. And even if you weren't, I came here with my own agenda. I've got no right to feel what I feel, but I needed you to know the truth, all of it, before you decide what to do next." "And what are my options?" Willow asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could leave," Frederick suggested. "Take the money we've saved, start fresh somewhere the Suttons can't find you, or you could stay and fight, knowing it might cost you everything." "And what about you? What will you do?" Frederick's gaze was steady, certain. "If you leave, I'll help you get safely away. If you stay, I'll stand with you. Either way, I'll see the Suttons pay for what they've done to my brother, to you, to everyone they've hurt." Willow moved to the kitchen table and sat down, needing to process everything he'd told her. Frederick remained by the window, giving her space to think. Finally, she looked up at him. "I'm not leaving. This land is mine, not Gilbert's, not the Suttons'. I've put too much of myself into it to walk away now." Relief washed over Frederick's face. "Then we prepare," he said simply. The next days passed in a flurry of activity. Frederick taught Willow how to shoot his Colt revolver, complementing the shotgun skills she already possessed. They reinforced doors and windows, positioned lookout points, and moved the cattle to the most remote pasture where they might escape notice. Word spread through the small community about the confrontation at the Everett ranch. To Willow's surprise, several neighboring ranchers rode out to offer support. Most had their own grievances against the Sutton's stolen cattle, intimidated workers, water rights disputes. What had seemed like an isolated problem suddenly revealed itself as a cancer eating at the heart of the county. "The Rangers should be here within the week," Sheriff Tanner informed them when he rode out to check on their preparations. "Just hold tight until then." But Willow and Frederick both knew the Suttons wouldn't wait for the law to arrive. The attack, when it came, would be swift and designed to leave no witnesses. On the fourth night after Gilbert's visit, as a half-moon hung in the sky, Frederick spotted movement along the tree line beyond the south pasture. "They're here," he said quietly, moving away from the window. "At least 6 riders, moving slow. They'll likely split up to surround the house." Willow felt a cold calm settle over her. They had prepared for this, had known it was coming. She checked her shotgun one last time, then moved to her position near the back door. "Remember," Frederick said, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. "If it goes badly, there's a horse saddled in the barn. You ride hard for town and don't look back." Willow met his gaze in the dim light. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Before he could argue, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet night. A flaming bottle had been thrown through the front window, instantly igniting the curtains and spreading to the worn rug beneath. "Fire!" Frederick shouted, moving quickly to smother the flames with a blanket they'd prepared for just such a tactic. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, bullets splintering wood and shattering what remained of the windows. Willow ducked low, crawling to the water bucket they'd positioned near the door, ready to douse any new flames. Frederick returned fire through a narrow opening in the shuttered window, his shots carefully placed. A cry from outside told them he'd found at least one target. "Try to force us out with fire," he muttered, reloading quickly. "Oldest trick in the book." "Frederick," Willow called urgently. The roof. The distinctive crackle of flames above them confirmed her worst fear. They'd thrown fire onto the shake-shingled roof as well. Within minutes, the entire house could be ablaze. "We need to move to the barn," Frederick decided. "It's stone on 3 sides, better defensible position." They had prepared for this contingency as well. Using the smoke for cover, they slipped out the back door, staying low as they dashed toward the barn. Bullets kicked up dirt around their feet, but the darkness and smoke worked in their favor. Once inside the barn, Frederick barred the heavy door while Willow climbed to the hayloft, positioning herself at a small window that overlooked the yard between the house and barn. From here, she could see dark figures moving around the now fully burning house. "They don't know we've moved," she whispered as Frederick joined her. "They still think we're inside." Frederick nodded grimly. "Not for long. Once they realize, they'll focus on the barn." They waited in tense silence as their home burned, the flames casting a hellish glow over the yard. Gradually, the Sutton men realized their quarry had escaped the inferno. Shouts of anger echoed across the property as they regrouped. "Check the barn." A voice commanded Gilbert's voice, Willow realized with a surge of bitter fury. Her husband was participating in the destruction of the home they had built together. "Get ready," Frederick whispered, positioning himself at the other end of the hayloft. Footsteps approached the barn. Willow steadied her breathing, sighting down the barrel of her shotgun as the door rattled against the bar. "It's locked up tight," a voice called back. "Then burn it too," came the reply. "No," Gilbert's voice again. "The cattle are worth money, just shoot anyone who comes out." Willow and Frederick exchanged glances in the dim light. They were trapped, surrounded by men who wouldn't hesitate to kill them. "I count 6, Frederick murmured. 2 by the corral, 1 at each corner of the barn, 2 near what's left of the house." "Gilbert," Willow asked, "by the house?" Keeping his distance from the actual fighting. Frederick's contempt was evident. A grim determination settled over Willow. They might not survive this night, but they wouldn't make it easy for the Suttons. The standoff continued as the house collapsed in on itself, the fire burning down to glowing embers. The Sutton men grew impatient, occasionally firing at the barn windows to provoke a response. Frederick and Willow held their fire, conserving ammunition and waiting for clearer targets. "Something's happening," Willow whispered, peering through her window. In the distance, she could see movement riders approaching fast from the direction of town. "There are more men coming." Frederick tensed. "Reinforcements for them?" "I don't think so," Willow replied, hope rising in her chest. "They're coming too fast and from the wrong direction." As the riders drew closer, a voice called out through the night. "This is Sheriff Tanner. Throw down your weapons." Confusion erupted among the Sutton men. Gunfire was exchanged, but it was clear they were now outnumbered. 2 fell immediately, the others scrambling for their horses. "Stay here," Frederick instructed, moving toward the ladder. "I'm going to help the sheriff." "Be careful," Willow urged, but she couldn't resist following him down, unwilling to remain safely hidden while others fought her battle. Outside, the scene was chaos. The sheriff had brought not just his deputy but a dozen townsmen as well, all armed and apparently eager to finally stand against the Sutton tyranny. The remaining gang members were either surrendering or fleeing into the darkness. "Where's Gilbert?" Willow asked, scanning the yard for her husband. A shot rang out from behind them. Willow felt Frederick jerk beside her, heard his sharp intake of breath as he stumbled forward. Turning, she saw Gilbert emerging from the shadows of the collapsed barn door, revolver still raised. "You ruined everything," he snarled, his face twisted with hatred as he aimed at Willow. Before he could fire again, multiple shots exploded from around the yard. Gilbert staggered backward, his expression frozen in shock as he collapsed to the ground. "Frederick!" Willow cried, turning back to where he had fallen. Blood darkened his shirt at the shoulder, but his eyes were open, alert with pain. "I'm all right," he managed, though his face was pale in the moonlight. "Just winged me." Sheriff Tanner appeared beside them, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the scene. "Got here as fast as we could. Ryder came through from the Rangers saying the Suttons were planning to burn you out tonight." "You're just in time," Frederick said through gritted teeth as Willow pressed a cloth against his wound. "Gilbert?" she asked, not looking toward where her husband had fallen. "Dead," Tanner confirmed without emotion. "Along with 3 others. We've got 2 wounded and 1 surrendered." "The rest scattered." Willow nodded, feeling nothing but a hollow relief that it was over. She focused on Frederick, on the warm blood seeping through her fingers as she maintained pressure on his wound. "Let's get him to Doc Wilson," the sheriff said, gesturing for 2 men to help. As they carefully lifted Frederick, Willow looked back at the smoldering ruins of her home. Everything she owned was gone: furniture, clothes, the few mementos she'd brought from her parents' farm. Yet strangely she felt no despair. The land remained, the cattle were safe, and Frederick was alive. It was enough to begin again. Dawn found Willow sitting beside Frederick's bed in the doctor's small infirmary. The bullet had passed clean through his shoulder, missing bone and major blood vessels. "Lucky," Doc Wilson had pronounced. "He'll be sore for weeks, but he should recover fully." Frederick stirred, his eyes opening slowly to find Willow watching him. A smile touched his lips. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" she replied, her voice rough from a night without sleep. "The ranch is still standing," she assured him. "The house is gone, but the barn survived with minimal damage. Sheriff Tanner left 2 men to guard the property." Frederick tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "The Suttons will regroup. They always do." "Not this time," Willow said. "The man they captured talked all night. The Rangers are rounding up the entire gang, including James Sutton himself." Relief washed over Frederick's face. "Then it's over." "Yes." Willow hesitated, then added softly, "Gilbert's dead." Frederick watched her carefully, trying to gauge her feelings. "I'm sorry." "I'm not," she admitted, the truth of it surprising her. "The man I married was gone long before last night. Maybe he was never really there at all." She took a deep breath. "The sheriff says with Gilbert dead and no children, the ranch legally passes to me under Texas law." "That's good," Frederick said. "You deserve it after everything you've been through." Willow nodded, then asked the question that had been weighing on her all night. "What will you do now? Your brother is avenged. The Suttons are finished." Frederick was quiet for a long moment. "That depends," he finally said. "On what?" His blue eyes met hers, unguarded in a way she had never seen before. "On whether there's still a place for me at the Everett Ranch, or I suppose it's your ranch now with a new name if you want." Willow's heart quickened. "Are you asking for your job back, Mr. Faulkner?" A smile tugged at his lips. "No, madam, I believe I'm asking for something else entirely." She took his hand, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. "The ranch needs rebuilding. The house, the fences, everything." "It's too much for one person." "It is," he agreed. "And I find I've grown accustomed to having you around," she continued, a blush warming her cheeks. The place wouldn't feel right without you. Frederick's hand tightened on hers. Willow Everett, are you asking me to stay? I'm asking for more than that, she said softly. When the time is right, when my period of mourning is respectably over, even if I'm only mourning what might have been, I'd like us to consider a more permanent arrangement. Joy brightened Frederick's eyes. I believe I could be persuaded to consider such an arrangement. Good, Willow said, a smile breaking through the exhaustion of the long night. Because I have plans for that land, Mr. Faulkner. Big plans. I never doubted it for a moment, Mrs. Everett. Spring came to South Texas in a riot of wildflowers, painting the pastures in blues and yellows and reds. The new house stood where the old one had burned, larger and sturdier, built with the help of neighbors who had rallied around Willow after the Sutton attack. The barn had been repaired, the fences reinforced, and the herd had grown with the addition of 20 prime Hereford cows purchased with the reward money from the Sutton captures. Frederick's shoulder had healed cleanly, though it still troubled him in damp weather. He had officially taken on the role of ranch foreman, living in a small cabin they had built near the main house, a concession to propriety during Willow's mourning period. But that period was drawing to a close. 6 months had passed since the night of fire and death. The county had settled back into its rhythms, the Sutton threat fading into story and memory. Those gang members who had survived were serving long sentences in the state prison. Their reign of terror finally ended. On a clear April morning, Willow stood on her porch, watching Frederick work with a young horse in the corral. His movements were patient, gentle but firm, building trust with the spirited animal one small step at a time, much like he had done with her, she realized. In the months since he'd ridden onto her land with $500 and a secret mission, he had steadily built something she had thought lost forever: trust, hope, and eventually, love. She walked down to the corral, leaning against the fence as Frederick guided the horse through its paces. He looked up, smiling when he saw her. She's coming along nicely, he said, patting the mare's neck. Should be ready for riding by summer. Just in time, Willow replied. We'll need extra horses for the fall roundup. The banker thinks we might have enough cattle to justify a drive to the railhead this year. Frederick raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. I'm feeling ambitious these days, she said, holding his gaze meaningfully. He tied the horse to the fence post and came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Is that so? Willow nodded, turning to face him fully. My mourning period ends next week. I'm aware, Frederick said, his voice dropping lower. I've been counting the days. Have you now? A smile played at her lips. And what do you plan to do when that day arrives? Instead of answering, Frederick reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, holding it in his closed fist. I've been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the right time. He opened his hand to reveal a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained, the only thing of value I've held onto through all my years of drifting. Willow's breath caught in her throat. Frederick, I had a whole speech planned, he continued, a hint of nervousness in his voice. About how I came here looking for vengeance but found something worth far more. About how you're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. About how I want to build something lasting with you, not just a ranch, but a life. And, Willow prompted, her heart beating wildly. Frederick smiled, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. And I seem to have forgotten all of it, so I'll just ask plain, Willow Everett, will you marry me? Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his kiss full of promise and passion long restrained. Willow melted against him, feeling at last that she had found her true home not in the land or the ranch, but in this man's steady embrace. They were married on the first day of summer, a simple ceremony in the new house with Sheriff Tanner officiating and half the county in attendance. Willow wore a blue dress ordered from a catalog in San Antonio, and Frederick wore the first new suit he'd owned since before the war. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Frederick Faulkner," the sheriff announced to cheers and applause. Later, as lanterns glowed and fiddle music filled the warm night air, Willow and Frederick slipped away from the celebration to stand together on the porch of their home. "Happy?" Frederick asked, his arm around her waist. Willow leaned into him, looking out at the land they now shared in every sense. New fences marked the boundaries, healthy cattle grazed in the moonlight, and the promise of tomorrow stretched before them like an open road. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. His arm tightened around her. "When I rode in that day and saw you standing on this porch, shotgun in hand and determination in your eyes, I knew you were something special." "And I thought you were trouble," she teased, turning in his arms to face him. "I was," he admitted with a grin. "Best kind of trouble you could have asked for." Willow laughed, raising her face for his kiss. "I wouldn't change a thing." Over the years that followed, the Faulkner Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the county. Their first child, a son they named Thomas, arrived the following spring, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the herd grew to over 500 head of prime cattle. Frederick never returned to his drifting ways, finding in Willow and their shared land all the purpose he'd been searching for in his years of wandering. And Willow, who had once watched her husband ride away with nothing but dust and broken promises in his wake, found that sometimes the greatest blessings arrive in unexpected packages, like a tall cowboy with honest eyes, riding in with everything she'd lost, and so much more she'd never known to hope for. On the 10th anniversary of the night they had fought side by side against the Suttons, Frederick found Willow standing on the porch at sunset, watching their children playing in the yard. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, coming to stand beside her. Willow smiled, leaning against his solid presence. "I was just thinking about how strange life is. If Gilbert hadn't abandoned me, if you hadn't been tracking the Suttons, if we hadn't both been too stubborn to give up this land." Frederick nodded, understanding her meaning. "A lot of ifs that led us here." "Exactly." She turned to look up at him, this man who had become the center of her world. 10 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out I was just making room for something better." Frederick cupped her face gently, his touch still sending the same thrill through her that it had on that first rainy day in the barn. "I rode in looking for justice," he said softly. "Found a home instead." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in brilliant gold and crimson, Willow knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the greatest gifts came disguised as loss. Her husband had ridden away forever, but a cowboy had ridden in with everything she'd lost and everything she'd never known she needed.